There are moments in life when the air itself feels heavy with mystery. You can't explain it, but something deep inside whispers that a change is near. Not the kind you can predict, plan, or even pray in detail for, but the kind that breaks every pattern you've known. It comes in silence, in stillness, after seasons of confusion, heartbreak, and waiting. Waiting, you sense it like the faint fragrance before the rain. A quiet signal that God is about to do something extraordinary, something that won't just fix what's broken, but redefine the meaning of your entire life. There are times when God steps back, not because he's forgotten you, but because he's writing something so grand that it cannot be rushed. He allows the world to misunderstand you, allows doors to close that you begged to remain open, allows loneliness to surround you until you have no choice but to meet him there. You think you've been abandoned, but in truth you've been set apart. What looked like divine silence was actually divine preparation. What doesn't shine upon our princess here is a consequence of our sorrows which, even when washed silent by the waters, actually divine preparation. You see, when God plans to transform your life, he first separates you from everything that could interfere with his masterpiece. The things you lost were never random. The people who walked away were part of the pruning. The opportunities that vanished were the storms clearing the air for what's coming. You may have thought the ending of one chapter was punishment, but it was merely God closing the door on the version of you that couldn't carry the next glory. There is a holy disruption that happens before destiny unfolds, and you, perhaps unknowingly, have been living inside it. God is not in the business of rearranging small details. He is in the business of resurrection. That means he doesn't just repair your story, he rewrites it. He doesn't restore you to who you were before the pain. He transforms you into who you were always meant to be through it. Every disappointment that cut deep was chiseling you into something unshakable. Every tear you cried was watering the soil of a future you couldn't see. Every delay, every rejection, every night you questioned your worth was preparing the foundation for a new beginning that no human hand could manufacture. When God decides to move, he does not consult your timeline. He doesn't ask if you're ready. He makes you ready. You may have thought that your waiting was wasted, but it was sacred training. The quiet years taught you endurance. The heartbreak taught you empathy. The failures taught you wisdom. The loneliness taught you how to hear his voice. Everything you thought disqualified you is about to become the very thing that defines your power. There is a moment approaching, closer than you think, when everything that once confused you will make sense. You will look back and see that the seasons of pain were necessary scaffolding for the beauty God was building. He was never absent, he was assembling. And when his timing aligns with your obedience, transformation happens in an instant. Not the kind that merely improves your circumstances, but the kind that alters the atmosphere of your soul. You see, God doesn't transform your life by rearranging what's around you. He starts by awakening what's within you. The new season you've prayed for isn't coming from the outside. It's emerging from your spirit. That's why the old environment began to reject you. That's why people who once understood you suddenly couldn't stay. When the seed begins to grow, it breaks the shell. And that breaking isn't a sign of destruction, but of birth. There will come a day, soon, when you'll realize that everything that felt like an ending was actually a divine redirection. The prayers you thought were unanswered were being answered differently, not through ease, but through evolution. God was never trying to take from you. He was trying to expand you. He was turning you into the kind of vessel that could contain more love, more peace, more purpose, and more power than before. And when he reveals the next chapter, it won't look like compensation. It will look like creation. The kind that makes every tear worth it. The kind that silences every critic. the kind that causes you to say, "Now I understand why I had to go through all of it." Because God is not just about to change your situation. He's about to redefine your entire story. He's not giving you your life back. He's giving you a new one, a life where every scar tells of His faithfulness, and every loss becomes the soil of your becoming. The shift is coming. The story is about to be rewritten, and when it unfolds, you won't recognize yourself. Not because you became someone new, but because you finally became who you were always meant to be. In life, when everything around you falls silent, the prayers you once felt being answered now echo back without reply. The doors that once opened easily seem sealed shut, and the people who once understood you no longer seem to hear your heart. It is in these silent stretches that doubt begins to whisper the loudest. You ask yourself if God has forgotten you, if your faith was misplaced, or if somehow you have been left behind in the grand unfolding of destiny. But what you do not realize is that silence is often the language of transformation. When God becomes quiet, it is not a sign of His absence. It is a sign that something holy is taking place beneath the surface of your life. Imagine the earth before spring. Beneath the frozen ground, invisible to the eye, roots are moving, seeds are awakening, and life is forming in secret. The winter may look like death, but it is the most active time for creation. In the same way, when your life feels frozen, when everything seems still and unchanging, that is when God is working the hardest. The silence you feel is not punishment, it is protection. God is sheltering your becoming. He is covering your transformation until it's mature enough to be revealed. You see, if God showed you everything He was doing while He was doing it, you might try to control it. You might try to rush it. But divine work requires divine timing, and that timing often arrives wrapped in stillness. Silence forces you to surrender. It strips you of the illusion that you can figure everything out or make sense of the journey before its time. In silence, you learn to trust not in answers but in presence. The quiet, invisible assurance that even when you hear nothing, you are being shaped into something greater. This quiet process is the womb of transformation. Think about how a child develops before birth. The growth happens in darkness, in secrecy, in silence. The mother feels movement but cannot see what is forming. The world does not yet know that a new life is being prepared. So it is with your destiny. God has placed something within you that cannot be seen yet, something sacred that is forming beyond your awareness. That is why you feel hidden, why you feel unseen, because you are in a divine gestation period. The silence is not emptiness, it is incubation. And yet silence tests you. It tests your patience, your faith, and your willingness to trust a God who does not explain Himself. Many people give up in the silence because they mistake it for abandonment. But those who endure it, who stay faithful even when no sign appears, are the ones who witness the greatest transformations. When God is quiet, He is calling you deeper. He is teaching you to hear not with your ears but with your spirit, to recognize His presence not in activity but in peace. It is in those quiet moments when your character is refined. You learn humility because silence humbles you. You learn dependence because silence reminds you that you are not in control. You learn discernment because in the stillness you begin to notice the subtle ways God speaks, through a feeling, a scripture, a sudden calm, or even through the closing of a door. In that sacred silence, your soul becomes sensitive to divine whispers that noise would have drowned out. When God is preparing to transform your life, He often isolates you in silence so that you can hear Him clearly. You cannot enter your next season surrounded by the same distractions that clouded your vision before. He quiets the world so that he can awaken your spirit. You begin to sense that what once mattered no longer does. The things that once thrilled you lose their appeal. You feel detached, not because you're lost, but because you're being prepared to see differently. Silence recalibrates your soul. It removes the clutter of your old life so that you can receive the clarity of the new one. And then, at the appointed time, when the work within you is complete, the silence will break, not with noise, but with revelation. Suddenly, you will understand why the waiting was necessary. You will see how every unanswered prayer protected you. You will recognize that what you thought was divine distance was actually divine construction. God was building the strength of your faith in the unseen, so that when the blessing comes, you will not crumble under its weight. So if you are in that season now, where the heavens seem quiet, where progress feels paused, and where nothing makes sense, remember this: silence is not the absence of God. It is the evidence of his nearness. It is the still hand of the potter shaping the clay. It is the unseen brush of the artist painting your soul into something radiant. It is the sacred pause before a symphony begins. God is about to move, but first he makes you still enough to receive it. Because when he finally speaks, when the silence breaks, it won't just be a change in your circumstances, it will be a transformation of your very being. When life feels like it's tearing you away from everything familiar, people begin to drift, doors begin to close, and you find yourself standing in the quiet aftermath of separation, wondering why. You pray for answers, but heaven responds with silence. You think something must be wrong, but nothing is wrong. God is simply rearranging the pieces of your life. When he intends to elevate you, he must first separate you. Before transformation can begin, he clears the space around you, removing what can no longer fit the version of you he's about to reveal. It's difficult to accept, but divine separation is not rejection, it's redirection. God knows what and who can go with you into your next season. Sometimes the people you love most are not meant to walk with you into your purpose, not because they are evil, but because their presence would confine your growth. Their mindset belongs to the level you've outgrown, and keeping them close would only slow your becoming. You may cry over their absence, but heaven rejoices over your release. What you perceive as loss is often divine surgery, painful, yes, but necessary to remove the attachments that limit your destiny. When God begins this separation, he doesn't always explain it. He allows misunderstandings to rise, distance to grow, and circumstances to unfold that push people away naturally. You might feel confused, even betrayed, but what's happening is holy. God doesn't want you clinging to anything temporary while he's preparing to give you something eternal. The pruning is uncomfortable because it cuts deep. It challenges your heart to trust that even in detachment, you are being held. The vine must be pruned to bear more fruit. So must your life. You see, separation is the language of destiny. Every great calling demands solitude before revelation. Moses had to leave Egypt before hearing God's voice in the wilderness. David had to leave the palace before finding his strength in the caves. Even the most faithful souls must first be pulled away from comfort so they can learn to hear heaven clearly. The same applies to you. God is isolating you, not to punish you, but to tune your heart to his frequency. The silence and the space are forming something powerful inside you. Independence from human approval and total dependence on divine direction. Sometimes what feels like rejection from people is actually protection from God. You might wonder why someone suddenly stopped caring, why a friend betrayed you, or why a door slammed shut just when you needed it open. But later, when the fog lifts, you'll realize it was all mercy. God saw what you couldn't. He heard conversations you were not part of, saw motives hidden behind smiles, and shielded you by removing what was disguised as good. He took away the counterfeit to make room for the genuine. He removed the distractions so that your focus could return to Him. And though the process hurts, separation carries within it the seed of revelation. The more God pulls you away from the noise, the clearer you begin to hear His whisper. You start seeing patterns you couldn't notice before. You recognize that certain relationships were built not on truth, but on convenience. You realize that many of the things you once prayed to keep were actually the weights preventing your rise. Separation opens your eyes to what truly matters. It sharpens your discernment and strengthens your spirit to walk in purpose without needing validation from anyone. You may feel lonely now, but that loneliness is holy ground. God often hides His chosen ones in seasons of solitude before unveiling their purpose. The isolation is where He molds you, purifies you, and equips you. He's not only removing people, He's removing your dependence on them. He's teaching you how to stand in faith when no one stands beside you. Because the destiny you carry cannot be built on borrowed strength. It must be grounded in divine power. When the time comes and you look back, you'll see that the separation was not a setback. It was alignment. The people who left made space for those divinely sent to help you rise. The opportunities that disappeared cleared the path for doors that lead directly to your calling. God's separations are never random. They are strategic. Every loss you suffered was a quiet act of love, positioning you for what's next. So, if you're walking through a season where everything seems to be falling apart, relationships fading, plans collapsing, familiarity slipping away, don't despair. You are not being broken. You are being prepared. God is making room for transformation. He is stripping away what can't survive the altitude of your next chapter, because the version of you He's about to reveal cannot live surrounded by what once kept you small. This separation is not the end of your story. It's the cleansing before the dawn, the emptying before the overflow, the stillness before the miracle. God is not taking from you. He's making space to give you more than you imagined. Pain has always been one of God's most misunderstood instruments. When it enters your life, it doesn't ask for permission. It breaks, it burns, it exposes. You question why it had to happen, why it had to hurt this deeply, why the very things you prayed would stay were the first to be taken. Yet in those agonizing moments, something sacred is being shaped inside you. God uses pain not to destroy you, but to transform you. Every wound becomes a tool in His hands, not a punishment, but preparation for rebirth. There's a strange paradox about pain. The same force that feels like death can be the very seed of life. Think of the seed buried in the soil. From the outside it looks like it's being buried, suffocated, forgotten. But within that darkness it begins to split open. The outer shell cracks and something alive begins to emerge. It's the breaking that gives birth to the blooming. So it is with you. What felt like the end was actually the beginning. God wasn't burying you, He was planting you. Every tear that fell was watering the soil of your next season. The pain you faced wasn't random. It was precise. It targeted the parts of you that couldn't go forward. God allows certain storms because only storms can wash away illusions. Pain strips away the pride, the dependence on people, the false security of comfort, and leaves only what's real, your faith, your spirit, your truth. When everything else is torn away, you're forced to face what cannot be shaken. That's where transformation begins. Pain becomes the fire through which purity is born. It melts away what is temporary and reveals what is eternal. Have you ever noticed that the most compassionate people are those who have suffered deeply? The ones who understand the pain of others don't learn that through books or sermons. They learn it through experience. God allows pain to carve out empathy in your soul. You cannot carry His purpose without carrying His heart, and His heart is shaped through suffering. When you've walked through your own valley of tears, you begin to recognize the silent cries in others. You stop judging, stop rushing, and start loving in ways you never knew before. Your pain becomes the bridge that connects you to humanity. But pain does more than teach compassion. It awakens power. Before pain, your strength is theory. After pain, it becomes truth. You discover that you can survive things you thought would destroy you. You learn that brokenness is not the absence of God's presence, but the stage where His power is revealed. When everything else fails, and you have nothing left to hold on to but Him, you realize He was all you ever needed. A fire that once threatened to consume you becomes the light that refines you. Pain also serves as a divine interrupter. It stops you in your tracks, forces you to question your direction, and makes you look beyond the surface of life. Many of the greatest awakenings are born from moments of unbearable hurt. The betrayal that shattered you, the failure that humiliated you, the loss that left you numb, all of it breaks the illusion of control and calls your soul back to truth. Pain exposes the smallness of the world's promises and the greatness of God's. It reminds you that your life is not about avoiding suffering, but about finding meaning through it. In those moments when the pain feels too heavy, when it steals your breath and breaks your rhythm, remember, God is closest to you in the fire. He doesn't always pull you out of it immediately because He knows that the fire is shaping you. He stands with you in it, the same way He stood with the three in the furnace. The flames did not consume them, they purified them. When they walked out, not only were they unharmed, but their enemies could see the presence of God upon them. That is what divine pain does. It burns the ropes that once bound you and leaves you walking freer than before. Because the pain you're feeling now will one day become your wisdom. It will teach you what no comfort ever could. It will anchor your faith in a way that nothing else can. Every scar will remind you that you survived, not by your strength, but by His grace. Every ache that once made you question your worth will become the proof that you were always being prepared for something higher. God doesn't waste pain. He recycles it into purpose. So don't curse the breaking. Don't rush the healing. Sit with your pain and let it teach you what it came to reveal, because hidden in its darkness is divine transformation. One day you'll look back and understand that the wound that once made you cry became the doorway to your awakening. The same pain that once broke you will be the reason you rise, and when that day comes, you will realize that pain was never your enemy. It was your rebirth disguised as sorrow, waiting. The word itself feels heavy. It stretches time, tests faith, and challenges patience. You pray, you believe, and yet nothing seems to move. Days blend into nights, and you start wondering if God even remembers the promises He whispered into your heart. But what if the waiting isn't a delay at all? What if it's the classroom where destiny is taught? You see, the waiting season isn't wasted time. It's sacred training. It's where God strengthens what your blessing will soon require. The world measures progress by motion, but God measures it by preparation. He isn't in a hurry because His plans are eternal. When you think He's being silent, He's actually building something far beyond your imagination. Sometimes God hides you, not because you're forgotten, but because you're being developed. Like a diamond buried deep under pressure, your brilliance is being refined where no one can see it. The pressure is not punishment, it's proof that something valuable is forming. Waiting exposes what kind of faith you really have. Anyone can believe when doors are opening, when prayers are being answered, when life seems aligned, But the strength of your faith isn't revealed in your victories. It's revealed in your patience. Can you still trust God when nothing changes? Can you still praise Him when the promise feels overdue? True faith is not proven by receiving, but by remaining steadfast when there is nothing to hold except His word. The waiting season is also where God detoxes your heart from dependence on outcomes. We live in a world addicted to results. We pray and immediately look for evidence. But God doesn't want to be treated like a vending machine. He wants to be known as a Father. Waiting teaches you to love Him, not for what He gives, but for who He is. It breaks the transactional mindset and replaces it with a relationship rooted in trust. When you stop demanding proof and start resting in His character, you step into maturity. Every great calling in Scripture was shaped in the waiting room. Joseph waited years in a prison before the palace. David waited decades between anointing and kingship. Even the promise of redemption waited through generations before the Savior appeared. The delay was never denial, it was development. The waiting molds you into someone capable of carrying the promise without it crushing you. Because blessings that arrive too soon can become burdens if your character isn't ready to sustain them. And while you wait, God works. Just because you can't see progress doesn't mean there isn't any. Seeds grow in silence, muscles grow under resistance. Even your spirit grows stronger through what feels like stillness. Every prayer you whisper in faith plants roots that go deeper, unseen by the world but known to heaven. Those who wait in trust are not standing still. They're being strengthened from within. God doesn't measure waiting by time, but by transformation. When the waiting season ends, you won't just step into a new opportunity. You'll step into it as a new person. Waiting also refines your discernment. In silence, you begin to recognize God's voice more clearly. You start to distinguish between what's urgent and what's important, between what's emotional and what's eternal. Waiting trims away distractions and forces you to focus on what truly matters. It's in that stillness that you realize how often busyness masquerades as progress. Waiting teaches you that purpose isn't found in constant motion, but in alignment with divine timing. And when the appointed time finally comes, when the doors open, the prayers manifest, and the breakthrough arrives, you'll understand why you had to wait. The very season that felt like stagnation will reveal itself as the foundation of your strength. You'll recognize that the patience you cultivated was not weakness, but wisdom. The endurance you built in silence will sustain you when blessings bring new responsibilities. You'll see that waiting was not a pause, it was a preparation. So, if you're in that season where everything seems slow, where prayers hang unanswered and life feels like it's standing still, remember, God isn't late. He's deliberate. He's aligning people, shaping opportunities, and preparing your spirit. The waiting season is sacred because it transforms desire into devotion and hope into faith. What you learn here will anchor you when storms come later, because when the wait is finally over, you won't just receive what you prayed for, you'll have become the person who can hold it with grace. And in that moment, you'll look back and realize the waiting wasn't wasted. Every tear, every prayer, every test of patience was shaping you for the weight of glory that's about to rest upon your life. God was never ignoring you. He was investing in you. The silence was His way of saying, "Be still. I am building you for something eternal." Real transformation never begins with what's happening around you. It starts with what's awakening within you. Most people pray for their circumstances to change, but God is far more interested in changing their character. He doesn't start by rearranging your environment. He starts by renovating your soul. Because if he were to bless you externally while you remain broken internally, the gift would become your downfall. So before he shifts the world outside of you, he ignites a revolution within you. It's easy to believe that life will get better once certain things fall into place. Once the job improves, the relationship heals, the doors open. But the truth is, external change without internal transformation never lasts. You can change cities, change careers, even change companions, but until you change your inner world, you will keep recreating the same struggles in new places. The root of transformation is not found in movement, but in renewal. That's why God begins his greatest work by awakening your spirit. He touches the hidden places, your thoughts, your beliefs, your patterns, and calls them into alignment with truth. This is why your spirit often feels restless before a breakthrough. That uneasiness you can't explain, that sudden loss of interest in old habits or old circles. It's not confusion, it's awakening. God is stirring something inside you that no longer fits the old environment. You're being rewired, redefined, and realigned for the next season. That's why the people around you might start saying you've changed, because you have. You're no longer moved by the same distractions, no longer fueled by the same fears. What they call distance, heaven calls evolution. The transformation God begins within you doesn't happen overnight. It's not a single moment of revelation. It's a slow, sacred unfolding. He challenges your old way of thinking, the doubts you entertained, the fears you carried, the wounds you normalized. He exposes lies you believed about yourself so he can replace them with truth. This process can feel unsettling because the familiar parts of you are dying. But what's dying isn't you. It's the false version of you that pain created. The real you, the one made in his image, is finally being resurrected. God knows that if he changes your mind, your life will follow. That's why so much of his work feels internal first. He adjusts your vision before he adjusts your reality. You start seeing yourself not as a victim of circumstances, but as a vessel of purpose. You stop praying small prayers that beg for survival and start speaking words that declare transformation. You stop seeing your wounds as evidence of weakness and start seeing them as signs of growth. The change in your outer world begins the moment your inner world aligns with divine truth. When you start to live from within, from that place of divine awareness, you realize that no external force can control your peace anymore. The chaos around you may continue, but it no longer owns you. Your spirit begins to anchor your emotions instead of your emotions ruling your spirit. You become calm in the storm, not because the storm disappears, but because you've learned that God lives within you. You stop chasing validation and start radiating conviction. You stop running after love and start becoming love itself. This is what it means to be transformed, not just improved, but reborn. And as your inner world changes, your outer world begins to mirror it. The people you attract shift. The opportunities that find you start aligning with your purpose. You begin to notice that you no longer have to force what's meant for you. It flows to you naturally, because your energy, your mindset, and your spirit have changed frequency. You've moved from striving to aligning. This is the divine order. As within, so without. God transforms your heart so he can transform your life. This is why the greatest miracles often begin in obscurity. Before the blessing becomes visible, there is always an invisible transformation taking place inside. God may be changing how you see failure, how you handle waiting, or how you interpret pain. He's adjusting your internal lens so that when the breakthrough comes, you can hold it with maturity. Because without inner growth, blessings can become burdens. And when your soul is renewed, every blessing becomes a platform for purpose. So if you feel like nothing is changing around you, look within. The greatest movements of God often begin in silence, not in the noise of achievement, but in the stillness of surrender. Transformation is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were created to be before life wounded you. When that inner alignment happens, your outer life will follow like a shadow chasing light. God is not ignoring your prayers. He's answering them from the inside out. Because when your inner world reflects His presence, your outer world will reveal His glory. Sometimes what feels like rejection is actually the gentle hand of God turning you away from destruction. It hurts, yes. The unanswered call, the friendship that faded, the opportunity that slipped away. But every ending has divine precision. You see, when God says no or removes someone from your path, He's not taking something good away. He's protecting something sacred within you. Rejection in the hands of God is never punishment. It's redirection. It's how He steers your soul away from counterfeit blessings toward your true purpose. We often interpret closed doors as failures, when in reality they are shields. You wanted that relationship to work, that job to last, that plan to succeed, but God saw what you couldn't. He saw the betrayal you didn't yet see, the harm you didn't yet sense, the heartbreak that would have broken your spirit beyond repair. So He stepped in, silently, decisively, and blocked the path. You cried because you thought something precious was lost, but heaven was rejoicing because something dangerous was avoided. God's mercy sometimes comes disguised as disappointment. This is one of the hardest truths to accept because rejection wounds our pride. It makes us feel unwanted, unseen, unworthy. But rejection is not the voice of your worth. It's the language of God's wisdom. You are not being pushed away because you don't deserve good things. You're being pulled away because you deserve something better. Sometimes God has to let people reject you so that you stop depending on them for the love only He can give. Sometimes He has to let a door close so that you stop knocking on the wrong house. Every no you hear on earth echoes a greater yes being prepared in heaven. Think of the moments when you begged God to keep someone in your life. Someone who once made you feel whole but later left you shattered. At the time, you couldn't see that their absence would become your awakening. You couldn't see that the void they left would become the space where your purpose could finally breathe. God doesn't take away without intent. He clears out what was draining your spirit to make room for what will fill it. Rejection is often the beginning of realignment. The pain of being pushed away is the pressure that moves you back onto the divine path designed for your soul. There's a pattern in divine timing that we often miss. Before every new level of purpose, there comes a necessary loss. The crowd that clapped for you in one season can't follow you into the next. The people who once celebrated your light may grow uncomfortable as it shines brighter. So they leave, and though their absence may sting, their exit is essential. God uses rejection to reveal who was rooted in you and who is only resting on you. He allows them to go so that when you rise, the glory belongs to Him alone, not to anyone who once claimed to have built you. Rejection also reveals resilience. When doors close and you have nowhere to go but inward, that's where you find strength you never knew existed. You stop asking for validation and start seeking revelation. You stop chasing what's gone and start cherishing what remains. That's when you begin to see that rejection doesn't define you, it refines you. It sharpens your vision, strengthens your faith, and repositions your heart. What you thought would break you becomes the very tool that shapes you. Sometimes the deepest pain of rejection comes when it feels personal, when someone you trusted turns their back, when love you gave freely is taken for granted. But even that heartbreak holds purpose. God allows people to leave because their chapter in your story has ended. Keeping them longer would corrupt the plot. Every person you lose makes room for the people aligned with your next season. The ones who walk away are part of your pruning. The ones who stay are part of your planting. And when the new ones arrive, those who see your worth, respect your spirit, and walk beside you in truth, you'll realize why the others had to go. One day, when you look back, you'll see the beauty in the rejection that once made you weep. You'll thank God for every unanswered prayer, every closed door, every silence that felt unbearable. Because what you thought was the end was actually the redirection that led you to peace. God was never taking you backward. He was rerouting you forward. He was rewriting your story in ways your eyes couldn't yet see. Rejection was never rejection. It was a sacred invitation to trust His plan over your preference. So, if you're standing in a season of loss right now, if someone left, if something failed, if you feel forgotten, breathe. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. The path that once led to disappointment will soon lead to destiny. What was taken from you was not meant to last. What is coming will not leave. The pain of this rejection will fade, but the direction it gives you will last forever. God is not withholding, He is guiding, and every no you face is simply clearing the way for the miracle that fits your name. There comes a time in every soul's journey when God decides that your story as it has been written is no longer enough, not because it was bad, but because it was incomplete. You've been living through chapters of struggle, endurance, and quiet faithfulness, and all of it has been preparation for a divine rewrite. When God transforms a life, He doesn't merely fix what's broken. He redefines the narrative entirely. The pain that once felt meaningless becomes the thread that ties the entire story together. The losses that seemed random are revealed as sacred alignments. Suddenly you realize He was never editing your story to make it easier. He was authoring it to make it eternal. Every chapter of your past, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the seasons of loneliness, the nights you prayed with tears, will one day read differently in the light of what's coming. You will see that God was writing not in ink, but in revelation. He was preparing a testimony so powerful that it could only be born through struggle. The things that broke you will become the sentences of redemption. The things that broke you will become the sentences of redemption. The places that once humiliated you will become the evidence of His mercy. What once read like tragedy will soon be known as transformation. You've been reading your life from the middle, not the end. From where you stand, the story seems unfinished, unfair, unresolved, but the author has already written the conclusion, and it's redemption. God is not done with you. He's not rewriting your story because you failed. He's rewriting it because the old version could no longer contain the magnitude of who you are becoming. Every delay was a paragraph of purpose. Every detour was punctuation, not a full stop. You thought you'd reached the end, but it was merely a comma in a greater sentence of glory. When God redefines your story, He doesn't erase the pain. He transforms its meaning. The very memories that once made you weep will make you worship. The same people who look down on you will one day stand in awe of what grace has done in your life. You will find yourself saying, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have become who I am now. That's how redemption works. It turns regret into revelation. It changes the tone of your entire existence from survival to significance. Sometimes we resist this transformation because it feels too uncertain. We cling to the past even when it hurts because it's familiar. But God cannot give you a new story while you're still holding the pen. You have to surrender your version of how life should have gone. You have to let Him write freely, even if that means He tears a few pages out. Because He knows how to turn your fragments into poetry, your ashes into beauty, your failures into foundation. When you trust Him with your story, you're not losing control. You're aligning with destiny. The story He's writing will not resemble anyone else's. It won't fit the patterns of what others expect, because your life was never meant to be ordinary. The storms you endured were not random punishments. They were divine plot twists, written to reveal His power through your endurance. The times you thought were detours were actually divine rerouting. Every dark night was a sentence of foreshadowing, preparing for a dawn so radiant that the past would make sense in a single moment of revelation. And when that transformation unfolds, it won't come quietly. It will be the kind of shift that makes others say, "How did they survive that? How did they come back stronger?" The answer will be simple. God rewrote your story. He took what was meant for harm and turned it into harmony. He took what was meant to bury you and used it to plant you. You didn't rise in spite of what happened. You rose because of it. The tears you cried were not wasted. They watered the pages of your testimony. Soon, your life will look nothing like your pain. The same heart that once broke will become the vessel of compassion. The same mouth that once begged for understanding will now speak healing over others. The same spirit that once trembled in weakness will now carry divine authority. You will realize that God was never trying to restore you to who you were. He was revealing who you always were in Him. When this transformation is complete, your story will no longer be defined by what they did to you, what you lost, or how long you waited. It will be defined by what God did through you. Your name will carry a different weight. People will sense peace in your presence because your scars will speak silently of victory. You won't have to explain your journey. Your life will testify for you. Every moment of pain, every season of confusion will stand as proof that God's authorship is perfect. So hold on. The author is still writing. The same pen that wrote your storms is now sketching your sunrise. You are not being rewritten for redemption only. You are being redefined for glory. One day soon, you'll look at your life and whisper, "This is not what I expected. It's better." Because the God who began your story is now turning the page, and the next chapter is called Transformation. There comes a moment when you finally understand that every season, the silence, the separation, the pain, the waiting, the transformation, the rejection, was all part of a single divine plan. It wasn't random. It wasn't cruel. It was sacred design. God was never simply watching your story unfold. He was writing it with purpose. Every loss was a lesson. Every delay was direction. Every heartbreak was heaven's hidden hand shaping your soul. You thought you were forgotten, but you were being prepared. You thought you were breaking down, but you were being rebuilt into something eternal. Now, the clouds that once confused you begin to part, and light falls on the path you didn't know was being cleared for you all along. What once made you weep now makes you wise. What once felt like endings now looks like the foundation of a new beginning. Because God doesn't just fix stories, He transforms them. He turns the ashes of your past into the ink of your destiny, and the same pain that once made you question His presence will become the proof of His power. So stand still in faith. The silence is ending, the waiting is over, and the shift has begun. God is about to redefine your entire life story, not slightly, not partially, but completely. The version of you that walked through darkness is about to meet the version of you that walks in divine light. The suffering was necessary, the process was holy, and the outcome will be glorious. What's coming isn't a return to what was lost. It's the revelation of who you were always meant to be. And when that day arrives, you'll look back and say with tears of awe, he was there the whole time.